Orale, Cholo Trucker here, Wrestling Rehab. Shouts to all the junkies out there. What is going on, man? And here we got a special guest. I cannot wait to chop it up with this man. This man has been all over the place, man, from Ring of Honor, TNA, known as Impact, and all. And man, I want to squeeze this guy's brain and get all the information that we possibly can. And man, I mean, just if you guys ever watched a perfectionist wrestle in the ring, very entertaining. You got to bring this man's name up. Let's go ahead and bring in my man one, Mr. Frankie Kazarian.
Yo,
How you doing, sir?
good man. Thank you for that intro, bro. I appreciate that. How are you?
Good, 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 good. It's a pleasure to speak with you. So highly appreciate you giving us your time. Welcome to Wrestling Rehab.
My pleasure, bro. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Oh man. So, you know, I guess I always start with how I became a wrestling fan, which in reality I have no idea. For as long as I can remember I was alive, I remember just watching wrestling. How did you become a fan of wrestling or get into wrestling or get introduced to wrestling?
So for me, I really owe it all, my career and everything, to the movie Rocky 3.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, when I was a little kid, 7 years old, I had an older cousin, and we were both big into boxing, big into all sports, but really big into boxing and big into movies. That was the era of the action hero. Loved Arnold, loved Sly, loved Chuck Norris, all those guys. Huge Rocky fan, and we were obsessed with Rocky 3. And Rocky 3, of course, famously has Hulk Hogan in it playing Thunder Lips and Clubber Lang, Mr. T. So we would watch that movie, at nauseum. And then the summer of '85, my mom had taken us down to the video store. This is back when they had video stores, kids.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
she let us pick out whatever movie. We pick out a movie. We usually like scary movies, or a movie about boxing, movie about sports, whatever it was. And I saw the cover of WrestleMania 1, which had Hulk Hogan and Mr. T on it. But to me, I thought that was Clubber Lang and Thunderlips from the Rocky movie, because I didn't really know anything about wrestling at that point. I'd never seen it. And we picked that up and we're like, this has to be cool. I don't know if it was like an origin story on those guys or what it was. But my mom was kind enough to rent it for us, got home and put it in the VCR. And that was WrestleMania 1. And first match was Tito Santana versus the Executioner. And I don't know what I was watching, but I was immediately hooked. It kind of combined everything that I loved: athleticism, sports, larger than life personalities, characters, comic book heroes come to life. My dad saw me watching it and he's like, oh, wrestling. And he started telling me that he watched wrestling when he was a kid. And I watched that whole event, rewound it, watched it again. And just from that point on, became not only a fan, but became absolutely obsessed with professional wrestling. So it's all thanks to Rocky 3. I often say I owe Sylvester Stallone my career.
Wow. You know what? In my opinion, probably the best Rocky. It had the best characters. Rocky
That's
3
really,
definitely.
yeah. I love all those movies. 3 has a soft spot in my heart because of what it did for me. I love 4. I love 4. That's if you don't get fired up watching 4, there's something wrong with you. I excuse me. I even love 5. I love Balboa. I like the Creed movies. I like them all. But yeah, Rocky 3. Just between Mr. T and
Yeah.
Thunder Lips and and it's so kind of over the top. It's great.
The ultimate man versus the ultimate meatball.
The ultimate meatball. Yep. Hell yeah, man.
I love it, man. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So, when did you? I'm sure, just like myself and so many other little kids, you guys, would watch wrestling and wrestle in the living room and break furniture and have parents yell at you and stuff like that. But when did you, Mr. Frankie Kazarian, say, like, you know what? This is for real. This is what I'm gonna do, because I thought that myself. So many of me and my jackass friends when we are
Sure.
little
Sure.
kids said, "Oh man, we're gonna be wrestlers. We'll be tag team champion or whatever." But I'm talking about serious. When Frankie Kazarian said, like, no, no, the rest of you guys are fantasizing. I'm not. I'm going for this.
Yeah, I mean, I was that kid wrestling with my cousin, wrestling with my buddies, breaking cabinets,
Mhm.
breaking beds. I finally got this giant life-sized like red monkey that had like actual long limbs. That was, I could beat up on that, and I did that forever. Probably, embarrassingly long. I was probably doing that when I was in high school, and but that was always kind of in the back of my head. It was always like I had this dream. I want to be a pro wrestler like that. That's just what I want to do. As I went to high school, I played football and baseball, and I was a good athlete, but I was always very undersized, very small and skinny. So, it wasn't like I didn't have the physical gift, especially at those times that you needed for professional wrestling. These are the times when it was the land of the giants. But as high school was coming to a close, I had signed up. I was basically one test away from going into the Navy. But that, at the witching hour, I kind of backed out because I realized, thankfully, before I enlisted, that I'm not good at falling in line. I have way too much of a rebellious spirit. I probably wouldn't have lasted long just because I'm not a fan of being told what to do. But that the Navy was kind of a goal of mine. But I always had this fantasy about being a pro wrestler, and then about a year after high school, kind of lagging around, kind of dragging my feet, I was like, you know what, this is what I want to do. And I told my parents, and they were relieved and horrified at the same time. They knew I loved it, and they had always supported me. And they said, if this is what you want to do, we're behind you. We want you to do it the right way. I saved up money and started researching schools. And this is in the mid to late 90s. And it started snowballing from there, man.
You know, there's two things that I really love: boxing and wrestling.
Yeah.
And
Same.
I could see a child, or not a child, but a kid, a young teenage kid going up to their parents and say, like, I want to be a professional boxer, and that being taken a little bit more serious as opposed to, I want to be a professional wrestling, and probably see parents like, oh, come on, this kid, all right, knock it off,
Yeah.
taking it more jokingly. I mean, you said your parents were behind you. Did it take a little bit of push for you to be like, no, no, mom, dad, I'm serious. Like, this is what I want to do. Did it take a little bit of a push, or just immediately they're like, okay, handle it?
To their credit, they were behind me from day one. I'm sure my mom was horrified. In fact, I know she was, because she still, to this day, can't watch my matches, even if she knows I'm fine and knows I didn't get hurt or anything. And my dad too. Again, I wasn't a big kid, especially at this time. I was, pretty undersized. So it's like, okay, like, they knew, I think they knew how much I loved it and how passionate I was. And they knew that if I put my mind to something, I get pretty focused and I get tunnel vision. Um, yeah, and they supported me, and they said, we'll support you any way that we can. And yeah, you're right, man. You know, Coming up and telling a parent that you want to be a professional wrestler, I even as a professional wrestler, if my son said that to me, that would take a bit to sink in, because it's such a off the wall career. It's like nothing else,
Yeah.
So again, to my parents' credit, they, I think maybe they thought, let's see him, we will support you. The worst thing that happens is he tries it and he doesn't like it, or he fails, or he finds out he loves it and this is what he does. And they were my biggest fans, up until my dad passed away a couple years ago. My biggest fan in the world, my mom, still to this day.
Yeah. I told my mom that I'm gonna be a wrestler, and I've been a truck driver for well over 20 years. So,
Hey,
but
brother,
who knows?
man,
One day.
you're doing the Lord's work. We always say we're kind of like, you know, I'm on the road a lot, but God, not nearly as much as you guys are, man. And like my hat goes off to you guys, because being out there on the road, you got, delivering goods and services, or deliver whatever it is you guys are doing. Like, you guys are one of the most overlooked professions on earth, man. And just from a guy that spent a lot of time on the road and logged a lot of miles, my my hat is off to you, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Let's talk about school.
Yep.
When you went to wrestling school, I mean, take us through your first week. Was there any bit of you saying, like, you know what, maybe this isn't what exactly what I want? I mean, I hear so many stories of how many people enter school, and most of them, by far most, within the first month, they fall off.
Yeah. So again, this is the late '90s, and this is kind of pre-internet. So I sent away for books on how to get into wrestling, and those books just had a bunch of information, and at the back of them they had addresses for all the wrestling schools in the country at the time, and there wasn't but maybe 15 of them. And I wrote into a bunch of different schools, and the Heart Camp up in Canada, and the Power Plant in Atlanta, and Killer Kowalski School in Massachusetts. And I got information back from all of them. I I they I met Bret Hart, and he
Oh,
actually recommended Killer Kowalski School, because I told him I wanted to get into the business, and he recommended Kowalski School, and that was gospel for me because Bret Hart was my guy, and
how did you meet the
j-
excellence of
j-
execution?
just at a trade baseball card show, just as a fan,
Oh,
just
really?
I
Okay.
was just a dumb fan coming up to him, telling him I want to be a wrestler. I'm sure like thousands of others have before, and he was kind enough to recommend Killer Kowalski School, which was cool by me. And the only problem was that was in Malden, Massachusetts. I live in Yucca Valley, California, which is pretty much the opposite side of the country.
Right.
But you know what? If I was going to do this, I wanted to be trained by the best, and the Bret Hart was the best in my opinion. He recommended Killer Kowalski. I knew who Killer Kowalski was,
Mhm.
so I saved up my money. I worked. Of '98, I drove my Chevy Citation to Malden, Massachusetts. And yeah, man, that first day I walked in, I walked up. If you've ever heard anything about Kowalski School, it's up these creaky stairs in downtown Malden, Massachusetts. And I was walking up those stairs, and I could hear bodies being slammed and the sound of the ring. And I walked in and saw this giant wrestling ring and all these giant human beings beating the hell out of each other. And there was a moment of, what have I got myself into, man? Like, okay, I wanted to do this, but like, bam, it's real.
Uh-huh.
It's real. And I was like, oh God. And this is kind of when the business was still protected, the tail end of it, where, it wasn't like I walked in and everyone's like, welcome, please come here. It was a lot of dirty looks. It was a
Mhm.
lot of, who the hell is this guy?
Mhm.
So it was super intimidating. And But you know what? I had everything I owned in my car parked downstairs, and there's no looking back, dude. It was nothing but going forward from this point on.
Good gosh, you drove from Yucca Valley to Massachusetts?
Yeah, and I'll tell you this: I on the second day, I my tire blew out on my 1983 Chevy Citation. Look it
Ah,
up. Maybe the ugliest car ever manufactured. So my tire blows out. So I unload. Now, keep in mind, I have everything in the hatchback of this. So I have to take out three giant trunks, all my stuff, my bass guitar, all this stuff, put it on the side of the road, get the spare out, the donut, change my tire, put
mm,
everything back in, get on the road. About 30 minutes later, the other back tire blows out.
oh,
And I'm just thinking, like, man, like, I'm like looking up to the heavens. Like, are you trying to tell me something, man? Like, this is
right.
only day two. Anyways, I kind of limped into Amarillo, Texas, and went to a garage, and just basically said, look, throw four new tires on this thing, because the tires had dry rot, and they were all, the front two were going to go next. So immediately I'm already out whatever it was, a couple $100 back then, whatever four tires cost you back in 1998.
Right.
So it was like, man, I'm sitting there that night, and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, this is like, I'm off to a pretty bad start. But yeah, man, it was like, what, all those moments, those really built some character in me.
Nice, 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 man. So, how you said it was a different time. It was more protected, and I hear about that a little bit here and there today. Today is a little bit different. You go,
Yeah,
it's a little bit more welcoming today,
yeah.
and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we got some tryouts and all, but back in the day, you're dealing with some pretty mean mug dudes, man. So take me through the schooling and what made you stay and say like, no, this is what I want.
Well, luckily enough, so that day I met Kowalski, and he's I gave him back in the day you could pay in installments, you could pay up front, you got a little bit of a deal. First thing I did, I met him and I handed him a wad of cash. It was basically like, here. And so that immediately, I think, got me some favor with him. And I signed the papers basically. And he's like, he said, "All right, you ready to start?" And I'm almost like, "What, today?" He's like,
Mhm.
"Yeah." He's like, "You have any?" I was like, "I have knee pads." So I went down my car, got my knee pads, and started learning holds and counters and transitions that day. Um, so luckily enough for me, a couple guys were very kind to me. In particular, a guy named Freight Train Dan and a guy named Steve King, Strangler Steve King, two guys that were very welcoming and took me in. Anyways, I worked out that weekend, and uh, the wrestling stuff. I don't know if it's because I was a decent athlete and such an enormous fan. The actual wrestling came pretty easy to me.
Okay.
The moves, how to do the moves, just because I've been essentially studying this for years.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, it took me a long time to learn when to do stuff, why to do stuff, where to do stuff. But anyway, so like on my second day there, I was staying at a Red Roof Inn. I hadn't found a place to live yet, and the phone in the motel room rings, and I pick it up, and it's hello, and it's Killer Kowalski on the other end. He's like, "Oh, it's Walter Kowalski. I'm going to pick you up. We'll go have some breakfast." Wow, awesome, cool. I don't know how he knew where I was staying. I don't know how he got the number, but he did. He
Mhm.
comes by and picks me up, and he takes me out to eat. And that day, and this was only like the second or third day of training, and he kind of looks at me and he goes, "You have something." He goes, "You have good aptitude for this. I think you can go really far." And dude, him saying that put me at ease like nothing else. Cause I was homesick. I was 20 years old. I was missing home. I hadn't been away from home. I was missing my friends. I was in a new city where that moves a lot faster than the small town I'm from.
Mhm.
And him saying that just, oh man, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulder. I was like, maybe I made the right decision, man.
Okay. And what were you doing to make money? Did you have a job on the side?
Well, I mean, so I'd saved up enough money to just kind of survive for
Okay.
a while.
Yeah.
I uh, the first maybe month I was there, I was living in a loft of a apartment, like I guess it was a house, a loft of a house with two other dudes.
Okay.
So it was three dudes living in you can't see the room I'm in right now. Three
Uh,
dudes, grown men, living in a room smaller than I'm in right now. And it wasn't even a room, it was a loft. So it came to a peak. So, as you walk towards the front of the house, you had to hunch down. Three dudes sleeping in sleeping bags, one bathroom. Not a pretty sight, man. It was, but I had everything I owned in a couple trunks. It was crowded. We had a little TV on the floor. But it wasn't about that, man. It was about, well, the important thing was going to that school Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. Uh, eventually my living situation changed. I had a buddy with me that was also training. He split, things happened. He had to leave. I had to do the whole live in your car thing for a couple days. Thankfully that only lasted a few short days. Uh, and started looking for a place to live. I found a place right off Route 1 where it was essentially basically like a boarding house. It was owned by this old lady, uh, a very nice little old lady, and she had a giant house, probably like 8, 9 rooms, and she just rented them to like vagabonds and transients like me. There was one guy that had a job where he was gone a lot. There was a guy that was a truck driver that lived there, and there was me, and I lived upstairs, and so I found my place to live. It was $100 $100 a week, which was high for me back then, but it was affordable, and it was great. That lady was a godsend, man. I lived there the entire time, And so, I had my little room to live, but you know what? Again, that was just a place to lay my head at night, because what was important again was the days I was spending in class.
Okay. And how long did you spend before you had your first match? Like your first actual real match in front of audience?
So I started in March of '98, and I had my first match that May, and it was not by
Oh,
design.
wow.
I was at that point, I was going to shows with my buddy Freight Train, who I spoke about earlier, who was wrestling normally. He was on the circuit. So I was going to shows, setting up rings, working security, doing whatever was needed. And I went to a show with him in Gardner, Massachusetts, and I helped set up the ring and set up chairs and all that, and was just kind of a body there for whatever they needed. Uh, Honky Tonk Man needed me to take Polaroids for him as fans were coming up to him. So I was taking Polaroids for the Honky Tonk Man, literally the guy taking the pictures, and then got a tap on the shoulder, and it was one of the guys, and he said, "Hey, uh, do you have gear with you?" And I didn't have wrestling gear at the time. I still was like, "I have knee pads." And like,
Uh-huh.
"Okay, come here." So I had to put the camera down, went in the back, and was told by the promoter that one of the wrestlers' cars had broken down, and that I needed to wrestle that night. And I was like, "Okay, who am I wrestling?" And I was going to wrestle Freight Train Dan. Thank God, he was my friend, baby face, big guy, trusted him. Had no gear. The promoter was a guy named Richard Byrne, um, and he had some gear for me. He had some purple tie dyed gear and some white boots. So he kind of threw me the gear and the boots and gave me the old, like, "Hey kid, those boots have been all over the world," like. So I, got dressed. We talked about the match, what we were going to do, and honest to God, I'm kind of glad it happened that way, because I didn't even have the time to get nervous, because it all happened so fast. They put a manager with me, a bad guy manager, and this is '98, and New England in '98 was kind of a hotbed, so even indie shows were pretty packed. So there was probably over 1,000 people here. So I go in, they hit, "Welcome to the Jungle," which was cool. They
Mhm.
hit that. I go out with my manager, just kind of, yay, just do the match. It was kind of a blur, but I remember, like, after it was over with, I was like, such a feeling of nirvana, and such a feeling of like, I did it, man. I wrestled. I'm a wrestler. I wrestled a match, dude. Like, I was on cloud nine, and I think I made $75, which I wouldn't make $75 again for another probably 2 years. And I was like, I'm rich, and I'm a pro wrestler. So like, dude, I was on cloud nine. I remember driving back. We stopped at a Chili's, and I ordered the steak because I could afford it this time, and just talking about the business. And man, I remember that night like it was yesterday. What a wonderful memory that is, man.
You know what, Kaz? Two things that you said right there. One was that was the way to do it just on the fly like that. Because had they told you a week in advance, hey, you know what, this coming up Saturday, you're gonna have your first match, you would have all week just to be overthinking it and getting
Yeah,
yourself nervous, as opposed to like, hey, come here, kid. These boots, you get throw them on. Don't
yeah.
mess them up. They've been all over the world. You get in that ring. Okay, so you were a heel in your first match, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, luckily, I mean, I had a very good manager who was a good heel manager, because I didn't know what the hell to do other than, like, you know, this flip someone off. Like, I didn't know, you know. Luckily, the guy I was working with was very experienced, and he called a good match where I was, I he would get, he would outshine me, and I would cheat to get on top of him, and really held my hand through the whole thing. And but I was, like I said, the moves I could do, the athleticism of it, that I could take good bumps, I could take good backdrops, I could get thrown to the floor, I can make a baby face look good. But working as a heel, I was just learning how to do that stuff. So thank God, if I didn't have the manager, I think I would have probably been a little bit more nervous. But the manager was my mouthpiece, and he was so kind of over the top that the eyes were kind of focused on him. But
Mm.
that helped out a great deal. But yeah, my first match, I was a heel, and I got beaten 8 to 10 minutes, the way it should be.
Yeah, you know what? It's not as big as today. But once upon a time, managers were the thing, man. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
managers made the show. You had just some all-time great managers. They're not
yeah.
around as much. They're not utilized as much as today. But once upon a time, man, managers can really put on a show, man. Just being out there and just their presence and what they do. So
You're not kidding, man. For my money, um, and this is my opinion, Bobby Heenan, I think, might be the greatest talent in the history of professional wrestling. And I'm saying the greatest overall talent
uh,
because there's nothing Bobby Heenan couldn't do. He could
mm,
wrestle, he could talk you into the seats, he can make you hate him, he can make you love him, he can make you laugh, he can make you cry. He was unbelievably talented. I think Bobby Heenan is the single most wonderful talent this business has ever produced, man. But I mean, God, you go back to, yeah, that's again, I came up in the 80s.
mm,
Mr. Fuji, Jimmy Hart, Jim
mm.
Cornette, Bobby Heenan, Slick, Freddie Blassie. God, there's so many awesome managers. I really miss that aspect of the business.
As do I, as do I. Managers are just not utilized like that anymore. But yeah, there's just so many great. They added so much to the story. It was a kick-ass time, man. I loved it. So, Kez, let's talk about now when you excel a little bit more. Did you get a phone call? Did Kowalski say like, "Hey, come down, look at this kid"? What was the next step for Cash to move up a step and get the career really rocking and rolling a little more?
So it was just continue to train and continue to train. And luckily for me, I developed a friendship with Walter, with Kowalski. And he was older at the time, but he was still getting in the ring and showing guys things. But he didn't like to drive. So he would come to my house and especially on the weekends, and I would drive his car for him. And we would go to he loved going to church. So I would go to church with him. And we go to Catholic mass on Sundays. Then we go have breakfast, and we go to the wrestling school. And we do the same thing on Saturdays, minus the church. But so I got the benefit of being in the class with Walter, an hour before the other students arrived, and it was like that pretty much every weekend. And so I got the benefit of him showing me stuff one on one, and just the lessons I would learn from him, just talking and listening. And yeah, and it was just that. It was, just continue to grind. And I wasn't necessarily going to get booked on shows because I was brand new, but, just so happened I got a call maybe, 2 or 3 weeks after my first match. And it was, hey, the Iron Sheik needs a ride from Boston to Maine. Me and another guy, can you go pick him up? Sure. We went and picked up the Iron Sheik, drove him up to a show for Tony Atlas. Uh, and because we did that, they gave me another match on the show. So I got another match. Then got, hey, there's a battle royal. We need you for that. Okay, cool. Finally got booked on a show. Hey, we're gonna have a show in 2 weeks. You're gonna wrestle Tim McNeely, who's another bad son of a bitch, great talent from New England. And it just kind of started snowballing from there. And unfortunately, at this time, after a while, things start happening with me. Funds start running very low. I'm very, very, very homesick, and certain things happen, and I have to then transition back to California. But my time in Massachusetts, learning from Kowalski, 100% made me the wrestler I am today.
Okay. Quick question. Did anybody look at you like, "Oh, you're a California kid. You're not cut for this, kid. Go back to the sunshine.
Yeah,
Go back, go back,
100%.
go back to the beach. Go back to the palm trees in Hollywood, kid."
100%, dude. It was California pretty boy. That was
Okay.
it. Because uh, those cats in New England, they're
Mm,
they're 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 a hard group. They blue collar people, hard workers, hard partiers. Just a different lifestyle, dude. And I'm a kid from the Southern California desert, man.
mm,
I was a foreigner, and it was a lot of that. It was a lot of ball busting. It was a lot of, oh, pretty boy, long haired, tan, like all that, just relentless ball busting. But there was a lot of that, and there was probably some resentment, like who's this kid think he is? So,
right.
luckily I didn't get ridden too hard over that. But yeah, there was a little bit of that, man.
Okay. Okay. So, man, Kaz, I mean, I want to get to it because you were you were there, man, when TNA, first got into the mix. So you came back home and take us from there. What happens with Kaz? Are you doing a couple of small shows here and there?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
what are you doing that finally gets you a phone call?
Well, so I mean, first of all, I'm pretty brokenhearted that I have to leave, but it's
Right.
I have to. And
Mhm.
before I do, I have training, and he had started training recently at the School of Hard Knocks, which at the time was Jesse Hernandez and Bill Anderson. So I knew
Okay.
there was a school, closer to me, an hour away. And so I had called Bill and Jesse at the time and told them my situation. Look, I'm a student of Killer Kowalski. I've had several matches, and unfortunately, I have to come home. And they're like, yeah, come on down. You could train with us. And I had talked to Kowalski about it, and he was like, he was sad that I had to leave, but I told him, look, at man, I'm going to continue training, and I'm going to come back when I can. And he knew who Jesse was, and he said, oh, Jesse Hernandez. He was a referee because Jesse used to referee a lot of WWE shows back in the day, WWF shows.
Mhm.
And so the fact that Walter knew who Jesse was, that really again put me at ease. So drove back. Drove back. My drive back was much easier than my drive to Massachusetts. I drove back. I think I got back on like a Wednesday, and I think that Thursday I drove down to San Bernardino and started training with Bill and Jess, which was the EWF, which you're
Mhm.
representing right there. And you know what? Again, took the same method I did when I was in Massachusetts. I went Tuesday, Thursday, and every Saturday. I lived at the school, and Bill and Jess at the time saw how dedicated I was. And to be honest, I was light years ahead of the guys that were kind of there. Other than a few guys, there was some exceptional talent there.
Mhm.
Uh, Ricky Reyes, Rocky Romero, those two guys especially. Sun Warrior, Sonny. But I had such a wealth of knowledge from Massachusetts and Kowalski's that I was kind of already here. But they saw how hard I was working. They booked me on a show pretty soon, and then another promoter booked me, and it started snowballing. And I started working regularly for Bill and Jess. The next thing you know, I'm their tag team champions. Next thing you know, I'm their heavyweight champion, and next thing you know, I'm generating kind of a buzz in SoCal. I'm kind of like, oh, who's this? Oh, the EWF guy, Frankie Kazarian. I've heard things about him. And then Bill and Jesse split, and there's a big thing, but I'm still doing my thing. Nice kind of transition over to UPW, and UPW at the time is a developmental territory for WWE. So I'm starting, that's when I meet Samoa Joe and become friends with him, and John Cena and Hardcore Kid, Aaron Aguilera, and KG Sakota, and all these guys, and start having matches. Now I'm being looked at by scouts and, making a bigger name. And then I start teaming with Nova, who's just fresh off ECW. And we become a team. And now I'm starting to wrestle on the East Coast. And now I'm getting my name in magazines. And it happened the way it was supposed to happen. It was all organic. It snowballed. And I carved out, that I went to Japan, started doing some stuff in Japan. I went to Mexico and, just was going everywhere and was doing, what Chris Jericho had and Chris Benoit had and all these guys that were heroes of mine had done, and was just waiting for the opportunity. And UPW was that opportunity. And then that all led to an international tour with Andrew McManus, where I met Jeremy Barash and Scott D'Amore and Jeff Jarrett, which led to another international tour, which led to TNA. And that led to TNA in the summer of 2003.
Wow, man. Wow, wow, wow. I mean, it seems like a lot happened there in just a short amount of years, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I kind of summed it all up. Like
Yeah, yeah,
in all those years was a lot of nights of agony and pain and
right.
training and car wrecks and doubt and dealing with mental sanity and still questioning, am I doing the right thing, and working three jobs at the
Mhm.
time to support my wrestling habit. Let's not forget that. And this is we're going from 98 until 2003. So, we're looking at about 6 years, 5 years of, me just pouring myself into pro wrestling, working every independent show I can, taking every booking I can, going to every wrestling class I can. And, because I have a very strong work ethic, that is why I, excelled. And that is why I got, picked up by UPW. That's why I got chose to go to Japan. That's why I got booked on these international things. And it's a lot happened in those 5 and 6 years, and I forged a lot of relationships and learned a lot of life lessons, and learned a lot of what not to do, but that got me to TNA, which was my first break on a national level.
And before we get to that, let me ask you this, Kaz. Were you were you addicted to wrestling? Were you doing like how you said you're working three jobs to support your wrestling habit? Was it because you loved being in the ring so much, or was it because you believed that one day you were gonna make it to the big times?
Both. I loved it. I loved the process. I loved the idea of coming up with new matches, new moves, new gear, new angles, new ideas. I loved going and, when I first, 99, early 2000, I started getting dark matches in WWF. I loved being in that locker room, seeing what the big time was, the production of it, seeing, oh, this is where I want to be. I know I am where I am now. This is where I want to be. Getting that perspective, learning the business inside and out, listening to everybody I could listen to. Um, I was enamored. I was like, dating didn't interest me at the time. My bass guitar playing took a back seat. I was just enamored. I was all in. But I think to succeed at this business, you have to have a healthy obsession with it. And it's a borderline addiction, man. I was so just focused on this. I was going to do whatever it was going to take because I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I wanted to do it, but I wanted to do it without those three jobs. I wanted this to be my job,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I've been very blessed that this has been my job for 2 decades.
Okay. Who's a couple of guys that you had dark matches with over in the WWF?
Early on, Bob Holly, uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Hardcore Bob Holly.
Crash Holly. Bob Holly beat me up several times. Him and I are buds now, and he's a sweetheart of a guy. Bob Holly
Okay.
was a bad son of a bitch, man. Let me tell you that. He beat the dog shit out of me, man. He put it on me. Him, Funaki,
Okay.
Taka Michinoku, Scotty Tuati, guys like that.
Okay.
Early on, just other local guys. They would put two locals out there. They'd send us out there first, and the place would just boo us mercilessly because they don't. They want to see Triple H and Rocky and Austin. And this in the business is white hot. This is when Rock
Right.
and Austin are main eventing, and they go out there and they see Frankie Kazarian and KG Sakota. Like one night we did have a very good. We had a great match in the Staples Center, and it was myself and Nova against Christopher Daniels and a guy named Suicide Kid, Mikey Henderson,
Mhm.
and we tore it up. We had a great match, man. Like the crowd was great. Like the boys in the back, like that was awesome. Like that was the first time I thought, like, wow, they might actually be looking at us as me and Nova as a team because we did really good. So all those type of guys.
Okay. Okay. So take us to TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. How did that come to be? You're over here, you're working uh some dark matches with the WWE. I'm just assuming that you're probably thinking like, hey, you know what? I think I got my foot in right here, man. But here comes TNA. They're getting something going. Take us through that process.
Yeah. So at the time, again, UPW was still a developmental territory, and I'm, being scouted by Bruce Pritchard every month, and I develop a relationship with him, and he's telling me, he's like, hey, you're good, your fundamentals are down, your timing's good, your footwork's good, your look is good, maybe get some more size on. You keep basically just told me keep doing what you were doing, and so I'm like, okay, and I'm having dark matches and dark matches, and I'm like, okay, after a while, I'm like, I'm kind of spinning my wheels, so but I'm continuing to try. Anyways, that tour of Europe with WWA, I met again Jeremy Barash, Scott Demore, and Jeff Jarrett, and all of those guys, gentlemen, had just been involved with the beginning of TNA. So I did another tour with that group in 2003, and as soon as that I came back from that tour, I got a call from Scott Demore, and he asked me to come to Nashville because they wanted to use me for TNA. I also had a tryout with Ring of Honor that weekend, and I also had another WWF tryout on that Monday. So I did Ring of Honor on Saturday, a tryout, WWF Monday a tryout, and then I did Wednesday TNA. And I did my match. I did a 6-man tag, and then they called me and they're like, "Okay, we need you back next week." And I was like, "Okay." Then I did a match next week, and um, they called me and they want me again, and I go, "Wow, okay. Do I work here? I don't know what's going on." And I just they kept calling me back and calling me back and calling me back, and then they called me, 5, 6 weeks later, and like, "We want you to wrestle AJ Styles for the NWA TNA at that time world championship." And I had already known AJ. We were already pals. And okay, awesome. So I go out there, and AJ and I had a great match. And then eventually they offered a couple guys contracts, myself, Chris Sabin, and they put us under contract. And I was like, I don't know if I realized it at the time, but I was like, this is it. I'm a
Mhm,
pro wrestler. I'm being paid
mhm,
to, I'm being flown out. I'm
mhm.
doing it. Like, all that hard work had culminated in this, man.
Okay, okay, and the pay was good enough where you're like, "Hey, this is my career here."
By today's standards, probably not, but for me back
Uh-huh.
then, yes, it was.
Okay.
Because I was still doing independence on the side on the weekends, and I was getting a decent amount from TNA at the time. So I'm a single guy living in an apartment. I
Mhm,
don't,
mm,
I don't have much. I don't need much.
mhm.
So for me, it was great. Yeah, and then as I as TNA got bigger and I started working more and more for them, we started working in Orlando and Nashville. My pay got doubled. Then I thought, this is it. I was on the high horse at that point, man.
So, okay, man, look, I got a lot of questions when it comes to TNA. When TNA came across my set of eyeballs, it was capturing because the ring was like an octagon.
Yeah,
And not only that, those were the days. I mean, you guys were having some crazy matches, man. I can't even really remember all the names to the matches, but I was just like, wow, this is crazy. Just seeing the ring. I think it was with six. It was like an octagon,
so it was
and I was
hexagon, a 6-sided ring. Yeah,
a hexagon. There you go. I was just like, man, this was it was actually pretty cool to watch. And I remember, I don't know how fast how if I'm going fast forward here, but I remember the Hulkster, he got in, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think I remember him saying this on an interview that it was his idea to put it back to a squared ring circle because
mhm.
the impact that it had when you take a bump in the ring. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was the difference of taking a bump?
The 6-sided ring was cool. It was different. When you turn on the TV and you see it, it is visually striking because it's different. Um, but the ring itself was pretty hard, and that was just because the way it had to be constructed. And if you did stuff off the top rope, the top rope, the corners aren't like this. Like in a traditional ring, they bow out more, so your foot placement is a little bit different when you're standing on the top rope. And just there's shorter sides, so your movement is different. And the bump was pretty stiff. I just kind of rolled with the punches, man. I was like, okay, well, let's do it, and got you. And I was like, a ring's a ring to me. I can work in a 6-sided ring. I can work in a 4-sided traditional ring. But I got really used to working in the 6-sided ring. And then I believe you are right. I don't know if that's true, but I believe the decision was made to go back to a traditional wrestling ring once Hulk came in. And I was fine with that. I was, certainly the ring was had a little more give to it. So I was fine with that. And I think maybe the 6-sided ring had ran its course at that point. I know a lot of people love that ring and miss it, but it is what it is. It's, ring is a ring. It's what happens inside that ring what matters.
I agree. When TNA first popped up, at least for me, um, it kind of it somewhat reminded me a little bit of, it gave the outlet of what ECW kind of used to be.
Yeah.
ECW was no longer around. I mean, unless anybody wants to count the WWE ECW, I don't
Yeah.
count that. But the original ECW, when
Yeah.
TNA came around, it almost seemed like that fan base kind of transitioned over to TNA, and it was like, wow, look at this. This is badass, man. And aesthetically, yeah, there was a lot of things going on there. And some of the matches were, I mean, were pretty badass. Even though personally myself, I didn't really know the names. I didn't really know who AJ Styles was. I didn't
Yeah.
really know who you were. You know, I was a big WWF, WWE guy. I'm like, okay, I don't who are these guys? But I'm seeing you guys do these crazy things. I'm like, holy smokes, man. Like this is very pleasing to watch, you know. So I mean, my hat's off to you guys, man, because you guys really put on one heck of a great show. And then seeing the Hulkster go over there, and I'm like, oh, okay, you know, he's over there and he's saying, you know, we're not competing with the WWE, we're just putting on a better product. And in many ways, you guys did. In many ways, you guys did.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we were honestly the first real alternative, out of the wake of WCW being sold and ECW collapsing and all that. And, now we're left, when we once had three options, now we're left with one. And there was a lot of fans that wanted more. And, you know, TNA was the first real alternative. And we had a rabid fan base, man. Those shows, those early shows in Nashville and those early shows in Orlando at the Impact Zone, those fans were loyal. They were rowdy. You look at some of those early clips, man, the fans are actually moshing after there's big moves in a match. The fans are dousing each other with beers and water and moshing. It was electric for a while, man. And it was cool. And and it was so much fun to build that and to be part of like the X division, like you were saying, and being there with Low Key and Amazing Red and Jerry Lynn and Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley and AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and Chris Daniels and just all these amazing wrestlers, man, carving our own niche and making our own name, outside of the WWE system. It was one of the, I love those times. I have nothing but fond memories of that, man.
did you guys, as talent, did you guys have a lot of say in your creative? You know, there's all these stories in the WWE. It's like, hey, man, Vince says this, and that is it. Did you
Yeah.
guys have a little bit more say? How hands on was Dixie Carter? How hands on was the Hulkster? Was the Hulkster just there just for face, just to say, hey, we got Hulk Hogan working for us? Or was he really hands on? And how was it working with Dixie Carter and them?
Dixie Carter was hands on in terms of like she's running a business and she's going to be there, and she was not in terms of storylines and angles. She kind of she knew her role, and she knew you know um, to let Jeff Jarrett and the writing team at the time, Dutch Mantel and others. And in terms of or like early on, I basically whatever was given to me, I did. I was always I was always never a rock the boat guy, almost maybe to my detriment. I would do whatever they asked of me. Later on, when I had some tenure and some experience, I would, if something was given to me, I would maybe tweak it or go, "What about this?" And sometimes I go, "That's great." And then I got to the point where I was comfortable pitching ideas, and they were like, "That's good," or "Let's do this, let's do this." And eventually got to the point where I was comfortable collaborating with the top guys. Hulk was great. I mean, again, people have different opinions on Hulk Hogan, especially his time in TNA. For me, he was great. I got, I remember one time I wrestled Abyss and he pulled us aside and he said, if you guys want to get to the next level, you need to wrestle like that. He's like, that was great. See, he was just really complimentary, always very complimentary of me. I got to do promos with him. He was my experience with Hulk Hogan was nothing but positive. I know people don't all have that across the board, but my time in TNA with him was great. And he was hands on to a certain extent. He was there, he was there to help the brand TNA, but he was also there for the brand Hulk Hogan. And it is what it is. But I had a wonderful time working with him, and all nothing but good things to say about Dixie as well.
How is it getting in the ring with Jeff Jarrett? Is like, okay, he's the boss, you know, but you're in the ring with him as well to work with him. I mean, are you treating and at the same time he's a wrestling legend. You're in there with a
Yeah.
legend. So I mean, are you treating him any differently? It's like, whoa, wait a second, like me, like this is my boss too, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm in the ring working with my boss.
No, I don't think Jeff would have any of that, man. If you like,
Okay.
were not as if you were gonna like, he wouldn't want you to pull any punches with him. Jeff's Jeff's a third generation guy. He's
Right.
just a rough and tumble guy, man. And he's old school, so he would want you to be putting it on him the same way he's going to do to you. No, I was never like I know there was definitely Jeff the boss and Jeff the wrestler and Jeff my friend, and sometimes Jeff the boss and I didn't see eye to eye. Sometimes we would butt heads, and sometimes it got nasty. But Jeff the wrestler, I always had nothing but respect for, and Jeff Jarrett became a friend of mine, and a man I respect immensely to this day, and a guy that was very helpful to me. But no, Jeff's an old school guy, man. It was hey, I'm the boss. That's one thing, but when we're wrestling, I'm your opponent. That's what it is.
Okay. Okay. Hey, Kaz, I gotta bring it up, man. I gotta bring it up. I gotta bring up suicide.
Oh God,
Um,
okay.
word is that you don't like that part of your career. That's the word. If I'm wrong, correct
Yeah.
me, brother. But take us through that because you were playing suicide, full body suit, mask, and everything. I think for about a year and a half, 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that.
Yeah, well, the reason I was blindsided with the whole thing. Like I had just come off of a year where I'd wrestled Kurt Angle and Christian Cage and was in there with Booker T and all these guys, and I'm holding my own and I'm having great matches.
Hmm.
And I'm now not just the X Division guy. I'm now in there as a single heavyweight babyface, having great matches. And I'm like, my trajectory at that time I thought was great. Bobby Roode and I were kind of running neck and neck. He was doing the same thing as a heel. And I'm like, this is good. This is what I want to do. I want to be a top guy. But I want to be, I'd already been X Division champion. I wanted to, be factored into the world title picture. And all of a sudden, I get told, hey, we're going to do an angle where you quit and you come back as this character. And I was hurt. I was insulted. I was bamboozled. I went to Vince Russo. I went to Dixie. I went to Jeff. I begged. I pleaded. I said, look, and I understand what you're looking for. It's not me. They wanted a game type wrestler. And I'm like, I'm not the guy. Like, why? Is it something I'm doing wrong? And, they kept saying, no, we need somebody we trust. And I just didn't buy it, man. I was like, what? I just felt like my legs had been cut off and I couldn't get an explanation. And then I had to put the suit on. I had to learn how to do a stunt to get to the ring. And in my opinion, the character it fell flat. It never reached what it could have been. Even when I decided I'm going to embrace this character. I'm going to do everything I can. So I start pitching ideas of how this character could be different. And that just starts falling on deaf ears. And then I'm just kind of defeated and like, man, this is a step back for me. I felt, like I was spinning my wheels and just kind of stuck in the mud.
Well, I don't want to, twist the knife or anything, but
Now
honestly,
twist, brother, twist.
no, no, honestly, Kaz, I'm gonna tell you this, man. It was actually pretty cool, man. It was as just as a fan. Not that I was like, hey, I'm cool that Kaz is gone and we get
Yeah.
this, you know, luchador kind of suicide character. But it was actually pretty cool, man. The moves that you were doing, it was actually pretty cool, man. Seeing the code breaker from the corner, from the turnbuckle.
Yeah.
uh, you know, just from the eyeball, at least for me, I thought it was pretty fun to watch. But I thought, yeah, I thought it ran its course. That character wasn't gonna go too far. I thought it
Yeah.
lasted a little too long. I was just like, okay, this is cool for maybe about a year. But I remember it going past a year. I don't know how long it went. It must have gone about 18 months, 2 years, somewhere around there. And I was like, it kind of ran its course. That character is never really gonna be, super top dog or anything. But it was cool for about a year, man.
The character I think could have been very cool, and the
Mm,
character could. First of all, naming it Suicide was a stupid. That was dumb because
okay.
you can't market a toy called Suicide. It's just stupid. Uh, but the look of the character was cool, and I had a vision for Suicide to be TNA's version of Tiger Mask, to
Mm,
where I do it for however long, and then somebody else takes over, and then
mhm,
somebody else takes over. Like again, you could have Tiger Mask 4, Tiger Mask like Suicide 4. It could still
mhm.
be going today. And I never thought the character should talk. I remember I had an argument with Vince Russo because he had me cut a promo one day, and I was like, "This is so stupid. This character should not speak." This character should be so mysterious and ambiguous, like a ninja. Like I had so many cool ideas that I pitched. I had a cool idea based on if anybody's seen the movie The Prestige. If you have, you know what I'm talking about. I had a cool idea with dual suicide characters at the same time. I had a lot. I put my heart into that too, man, and that those just kept falling on deaf ears. Then they had me cutting promos and dubbing in a stupid voice, and that's when I knew they jumped the shark. And I was like, "This sucks, man. This sucks." At the time, I got hurt playing the character. I tore my tricep, came back and tore my bicep. So everything for me, I was at a personal and a professional low at that point, man.
Yeah, man. Like I said, for a year, I thought it was pretty cool. But you're right.
Yeah,
You know what? Should that character ever? Should you ever hear that character's voice? No, I don't. I think you're 100% right on that. You should have never heard that character talk
right.
at all. I think it would have lasted, or it would have been a little bit better. But that character was never really gonna get up there where Kaz could have got.
Not with a
Um,
name like Suicide, it wasn't. Again, that character, call it something else. Give it this cool. The character could still be around today, just as this masked badass video game wrestler that doesn't speak. And it could have worked, but we'll never know.
you you spend quite some time there at TNA before you head off to Ring of Honor. What what pushed you to make that decision? You were having I mean you were one of the pioneers, man, of TNA. I know a lot of people talk, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, and they should talk about those guys, but
Yeah.
Kaz's name should be mentioned somewhere around in there too.
Thank you. Yeah, I was almost a day one guy. I spent 12 years there basically. Um, and the management has changed a bunch at this point. The company's going in a different direction. I had, just came off a run where Chris Daniels and I had formed a tag team, and a very successful tag team. And we really, really hit our stride as performers, especially in terms of promos and live in-ring promos and vignettes. And, we were the guys that you love to hate. And we were really clicking as tag team wrestlers. Our chemistry was off the charts. John Gaburik had just been put in charge of talent relations, and he had made a decision that when Chris Daniels' contract was coming up, that he was not going to renew him. And he'd said the same thing to me. So uh, June of 2014, I was no longer with TNA, and at that time, it was the best thing because I did not want to be there. I had, management had changed so much, I didn't even recognize the company, and it had ran its course for me. Luckily for me, I kind of had a job waiting on the other side at Ring of Honor, and Chris Daniels had a ton of history there, and him and I came in the summer of 2014, just right where we left off in TNA, and started having matches with a whole new crop of guys and a whole bunch of younger guys, and just kind of kept that momentum going, man.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, a lot happened in your career when you left TNA from Ring of Honor to the start of AEW. Um, how long were you doing your thing at Ring of Honor before the whole AEW thing, came across your life where it's like, hey, you know what? We're starting this thing up over here, man. You interested?
Yeah, so I was in Ring of Honor from summer of 2014 to the December 31st of 2018,
Mm.
and really, really enjoyed my time there. And I remember hearing about a new wrestling company early in 2018. I was very close friends with the Young Bucks, and they kind of keeping CD and I and Scorpio Sky as well in the loop about, hey, we're talking to this guy. He has money. He's a wrestling fan. He really wants to do something. And it's like, I had heard that a million times, but like, wow, this one was actually serious. So I was in on the ground floor of what would become AEW very early on.
Okay, okay. And when you heard that, were you interested, or were you kind of just like, you know what? Look, man, you guys got to show me something because I'm doing my thing over here at ROH. You guys really got to show me something. Were you a believer right from the jump?
I was cautiously optimistic. Again, because I'd heard, I'd had so many carrots dangled in front of me at that point in my career that it was like, this is this just another, guy that claims he wants to do something. But and that that summer we'd met, a bunch of us had met with TK, and like, wow, like, looked into who he was. I was like, oh, this guy he's really does have, the finances to do this, and he very much is passionate about professional wrestling and loves this. And it just there was a bunch of us that coincidentally all of our deals were up at the same time. Myself, the Young Bucks, Christopher Daniels, Scorpio Sky, Adam Page, um, Cody Rhodes, Brandy Rhodes, Kenny Omega. And we all kind of like, collectively were like, if we do this, let's do it all together. It was kind of, that was the core group of guys that were going to be the first original AEW guys. And, as this progressed and got more serious, it was like, well, let's do this, man. Let's, again, that was a leap of faith too. I had a secure job at Ring of Honor, and this was a risk. We didn't know what this was going to be. We had high hopes. There was a lot of ambitious goals, but we were on board, man.
Yeah, yeah. And you were one of the first guys there with AEW. Um, Take us through that. And how long were you with AEW? It doesn't seem like you were there too long.
I was there from day one. I mean, I was one of the first guys, first 9 talent signed to the company.
Mhm.
And I was there until the last day of 2022. I
Okay.
was, I originally signed for 3 years. When those 3 years were up, I signed for an additional 3 years. And 1 year into that, I was offered to roll over, which means essentially we're going to want you for another year. And that was the end of last year, basically right around this time last year. And, I had already made up my mind that like this company was not what I thought it was going to be. The way they present their product is not what I thought it was going to be. The direction they were going was not necessarily a direction that I wanted to go. Um, I wanted more for myself. I have different goals, I have different ambitions, and just didn't necessarily want to be in that environment anymore. And had made up my mind that, please don't roll me over because I don't want to be here. And that's when we began talking about me asking to be released from my contract so I can go elsewhere.
Okay. I'm not trying to burn any bridges or anything, but how long into being with AEW did you say, you know what, this isn't where I want to be?
I I really, the first couple months there was great. It was like, this is great. We're on TBS. We have a lot of equity. We have a lot of fan love. People were ready for something different. Um, you know, out of the pandemic, we started doing the shows in Jacksonville, and I think AEW did a great job during the pandemic of keeping shows live and going. And there was a real camaraderie amongst the talent at that point. But kind of out of the wake of that and getting back on the road and just seeing the different decisions the company was making, both on television and behind the scenes, and it just soured on me pretty quickly. I continued doing my job, but I found myself wrestling in meaningless matches, and I found myself disagreeing with so much of the philosophy of professional wrestling. And it was just it was becoming to the point where I just didn't enjoy being there. And this is the one thing I've loved my entire life. And I didn't necessarily love doing this anymore, because my wrestling means a lot to me, and I want it to matter. And my time is the most valuable thing I can give anybody. It's the most valuable time I can give you. And it's the most valuable thing I can ask you to give me, because it's the one thing that we're both running out of. And with my time I have left in this business, I want to contribute at the highest level. And I didn't feel that I was going to be given that opportunity. So I decided I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to go elsewhere.
Okay. Okay. So you went back to Impact, which is actually going to turn its name back, to the best of my knowledge, is turning its name back to TNA, is it not?
We start this next January 13th to 14th. We're back as TNA Wrestling, and that's pretty damn cool if you ask me.
You know what? Everybody say what you will. It's just a name change. I think it's badass, man. It
Me
really
too.
is. I for one reason or another, just the fact that it's going back, it turned to Impact. Just the fact that it's gonna be TNA is just really interesting to me. I'm digging the heck out of that. Well, Kaz, I just want to ask you a couple of questions here, man, and
Sure,
just
man.
answer freely. All right.
Gotcha, brother.
All right. So if you could wrestle with anybody, past or present, you can only have one match, man. What would you be your dream match?
That's such a tough question, man. I get asked that a lot. It's such a tough. I mean, there's so many people I'd like to wrestle for so many different reasons. I
Okay.
would love to have wrestled my trainer, Killer Kowalski, though he probably would have beat the absolute piss out of me. You know, God, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, those guys, my heroes. Tito Santana, one of my all-time heroes. I loved him. There's so many guys back in the day that I would have wrestled. Hulk Hogan at his prime, because I would have made a lot of money wrestling him. Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, those guys. Owen Hart. I always like Sean Waltman. Those guys. I always liked the smaller guys that were the technicians and the high flyers. There's so many guys from the past that I would love to have had the opportunity to do something with.
Okay. Okay. Um, if there was only one match that you could show that's that pretty much defines you, Kaz, what match would that be that you had?
Again, man, there's so many. That covers a lot of ground. I mean, I could say a match against Kurt Angle. You're
Uh
wrestling
that
for that.
that's
You
what
know,
I was thinking, man. What was
I,
that?
I, I could I could say that
Slammiversary?
2007. I could say that. I could say a ladder match against Christian Cage.
Okay.
I could say recently a match, a 2 out of 3 falls match I had with Eddie Edwards, which we both went balls to the walls. And Eddie Edwards is one of the greatest wrestlers on planet Earth. That one really encapsulates who Kaz is, because just the story we told. Again, I can't. I just can't narrow it down to one, man. There's too many, and for too many various reasons that I can't.
Okay. Okay. Who's someone, or you can name a few guys that you just had the best chemistry where you're just like, oh, I'm wrestling this guy. Okay, cool. I love it because we just gel just like that.
Again, going from current backwards, Eddie Edwards, a guy who was also trained by Killer Kowalski, but we never had a singles match in all of our years crossing paths. We had tag team matches and multi-team matches, but never a singles match. And this summer, we wrestled a lot. And one of the most enjoyable times of my career is my feud with Eddie Edwards, because that dude is unbelievable. Uh, uh, Ring IQ up there with the likes of the best I've been in the ring with. Going backwards, Chris Daniels, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, all those guys. Christian Cage, Christian. I had his first match when he came back after being gone for 7 years. I was his first opponent, and we clicked just like it was the next day. Again, Kurt Angle, guys like that. I've been very lucky to have really good chemistry with some of the greats to ever, Bobby Roode, some of the greats to ever be in our business. So I'm very, very lucky.
Oh man, Kurt Angle, one of my favorites of all time,
Oh, one
man.
of the best ever, dude.
Oh, I love Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a two-part question, and it's about your ring gear.
Yeah.
You have wrestled in pretty much every type of ring gear there is. You've
Yeah.
wrestled in trunks, in shorts, in pants, the whole bodysuit with
Yeah.
being suicide.
Yep.
Okay, question number one. I mean, the suicide you didn't have a choice, but
Yeah.
question number one: the trunks, the shorts, the pants. Why different ring gear? Were you just trying to change it up? Was it for comfortable level? And second question is, what is the difference in wearing the different ring gear? Is there a big difference when you're in there?
So for me, it's all about kind of keeping your look fresh and reinventing. And um, I always liked the look of long tights. When I was a kid, I liked how WWF Shawn Michaels looked, or Ricky
Yeah.
Steamboat. I like the long tights, and I like the idea that you could put more design. You have more real estate on your legs to do that. So when I started, it was long tights, and then it was like, oh, I like the look of the biker shorts for a while, and it was like, that switches it up. And then it's like, I have decent sized legs. So it's like, in wrestling, you want to show off your good assets. So it's like, oh, you switch to trunks. That way you're showing off more of your body. And now I went back to long tights, which again, I like long tights because I just like the look of them. Again, you could put more splashes of color. And it's really just comfort wise, for ease of traveling, trunks are the best because they're small and you could
Mm,
pack a bunch of them.
mhm.
But yeah, it's just a matter of what I'm I'm most comfortable in long tights, but I could be just as comfortable in trunks. I mean, long tights, you're protected from any type of mat burn on your legs or anything like that, so that kind of helps. But I've always taken pride in having good gear, cool looking gear, different gear. I always liked how Ultimate Warrior dressed and Razor Ramon and these guys that held all these different colors and stuff. I was always a big fan of that. So I kind of try to emulate that in my approach to like my ring gear.
Okay. Aside from not liking being the character Suicide, wearing a mask. How was it wearing a mask to not wearing a mask? Was it pretty cool wearing a mask at all? Was it did it make your face sweat a little too much? I mean, what was it like?
It wasn't cool for that mask because like traditional lucha libre
Mhm.
mask. I'm sorry, the eyes and the mouth are cut out and you can breathe. This mask
Right.
was all black mesh. So you couldn't see the eyes and you couldn't see the mouth. So breathing
Yeah.
and seeing was incredibly difficult, especially when you're peripheral. I had no peripheral vision whatsoever. And wrestling is, you have to be able to have your head on a swivel. So that mask was very, man, I remember getting in the back and just can't waiting to take that off and just so I could take a full breath, man, because it was sometimes you would panic because you'd have 20-minute matches and you're like trying to breathe and all you're doing is getting sucking in this fabric and it's a lot of times it was pretty brutal, man. It wasn't your traditional lucha libre mask.
I
It
get
was
you.
it was very different. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I got a couple of luchador masks right here, but
Yeah.
no, they don't have that mesh. They
No,
don't have that mesh.
no, man.
So, hey, Kaz, my man, this has been so much fun, man.
Awesome.
I've loved it, man. I hope you can make some time to jump back on because
Brother.
we kind of fast forward a lot through a lot of things just to try to squeeze in as much as we
Sure.
can. But man, there's a lot of story, and your story's still not done. You're still doing your thing, man. So
Yeah.
I'm just like you. I'm very excited for this for Impact turning back into TNA. I don't know how much you can share or how much you even know, but is there any other changes that are coming other than just the name?
I mean, like, yeah, we're the whole presentation is going to look different. It's going to feel different. We're hoping to have some more surprises. We're all psyched internally, man, that TNA is coming back, and the fan reaction to it has been awesome. It's a long time coming, and we're really, this January, starting at Hard to Kill in Las Vegas, we're looking to hit the ground running and just explode out the gate and take this company to levels that it hasn't seen yet.
Okay. Is there any word on any the TV deal at all?
I mean, we're still, we're owned by Anthem, which owns Access, which is our television network.
Mhm.
They're very, very happy with us. We're very happy with them. We obviously want to grow and get more eyeballs on our product, and that's the goal. So I think going into this year, that is the goal: is to get more eyeballs on our product, no matter uh, how we have to go about that.
Well, my man, this four-eyed guy here is gonna be watching, man.
Awesome,
So by the way, here's our brother right here, Richard.
Richard, my brother. Thanks for listening, my man. Love you, buddy.
Kaz, my man, listen, you've had one heck of a career. It's not done yet. And I will be watching. Shouts to all the junkies. Make sure you go watch TNA, the comeback of TNA. It never really left, but in a way it did when it went Impact. But I'm excited. I really am, man. Kaz, brother, keep doing your thing. I'm a fan. I'll be watching you, man. Any last words to anybody watching? Maybe somebody wants to become a wrestler. Maybe there's just a fan of yours that's going to watch this in the archives. Whatever it is, any shout outs, whatever it is, brother, the floor is yours.
If you've supported me for 5 minutes, 5 years, 25 years, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, man. It's just been a surreal life, and I appreciate and love every one of you that I've shared a conversation with, a handshake with. And if you want to get into pro wrestling, if you want to do anything, uh, any walk of life, this is my advice. You get into it, you get out of it what you put into it. And that goes for everything you do in life. Um, put the work in, be willing to put the work in and sacrifice and believe in yourself and bet on yourself, man. If you bet on yourself, you'll never lose.
There you go. You heard it from the man himself. Cholo Trucker Wrestling Rehab. Shouts to all the junkies for my man Kaz. He'll be doing his thing over at TNA. Catch you guys on next one.
Later, bro.